Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Nicstalgia. I am super excited today. I have Barbara here as my guest, and she's had quite the career in pop culture and media, and I'm really excited to talk with her about the intersection of pop culture and media and personal growth as well. And two of my favorite things that she talks about are letting go of the shoulds, and also how to stand out while fitting in. I think that that's kind of been an interesting dichotomy of being able to totally embody who you are and be yourself, and at the same time getting to progress toward whatever kind of goals you have. So, hi, welcome, Barbara.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm excited too. So, tell us a little bit about where kind of the inspiration for you came with fusing pop culture, and it's almost like personal branding, but also, yes, inspiration and a little bit of motivation there too, to get people really embodying who they are in order to show up as themselves.
I love the way you positioned the question and put those things together because I've never quite thought about it that way. So, one thing I'll say is I think similar to you, was always a pop culture kid. I unapologetically grew up watching a lot of television, and I fell in love with music when I was, well, probably in elementary school, and loved my equivalent of boy banders light years before your generation of boy banders, but really fell in love with music like when I was in middle school. But getting to the other part of the question, I think one of my most marked characteristics my entire life has been my enthusiasm. I get very enthusiastic about things.
Me too.
And I'm a natural cheerleader. And so the reason I'm saying all that is I didn't really have a sense of that was marketable, or that was something that was even valuable in an office or a marketplace, but something that through my life, people have always commented on. And then fast forward, when I landed at VH1 in the 1990s, which was just the most glorious time to be at MTV Network. So it was the jewel in the crown was MTV, VH1, and Nickelodeon. It was just an incredible time. And they invested enormously in their employees. And it was the first time I ever worked somewhere that had a huge training and development department. And they really spent money on us. And that was when I started to find that these natural skills I had were valued, and they were identified by the executives I was working with. And I was encouraged to go take different kinds of trainings to develop that side of myself. And it combined with, because I was running the talent development department. And so the idea that those two things went together, skipping ahead, that is how I started to become a casting director, because I didn't know what that was and I didn't know it meant anything. But part of that was we worked with so many non-actors, whether they were hosts and wound up being VJs, but also a lot of celebrities and experts in our space, like a lot of music journalists and different kinds of commentators. We did the VH1 Fashion Awards. So we were working with fashion, all sorts of people who did not have experience on camera. And it was my job as a casting director to get a performance out of them. And so that's when I started to tap into that and started to understand about making people feel comfortable, also having a natural eye for talent and being able, the ability to see what somebody had inside of them that maybe they didn't even see about themselves. So that's kind of my long-winded, long way around the barn answer to your question. And then
I wanted the full story.
And then eventually I was like, oh, this is a thing and I should put some intention behind it. And then eventually I went and actually did training and became certified as a professional coach. So I could bring all these things together.
That's exciting. And that's something that I've actually thought about many times over the years, where it's like you think that you have all of the resources, right? It's like you have the internet, but there's still so many little boxes of what careers we're allowed to have or we should have. And you think, I know I'm super enthusiastic about anything and everything that I do, and I love pop culture. And you think, oh, but I'm not a journalist, or I'm not a pop star, or I'm not. And you just think of all of those kind of narrow paths to where it seems like you want to go. Oh, you want to work at MTV. Oh, well, I'm not insert job title into the blank. And so what kind of advice would you have for someone who feels like they have this potential in them? And to be honest, this podcast is part of that fulfillment for me, and seeing, okay, you know deep inside that you are meant for more, and that you have this love and this passion for something, be it pop culture or whatever, and you think there has to be some kind of way to bridge the gap between, I mean, it's a potential gap really, because you have that knowing, but not necessarily the knowledge on how to execute.
Okay, you kind of answered your question and gave really wonderful examples, because you're creating your podcast is an enormously valuable and valid path. So you really you brought up a question and you also answered it. There are a couple of different prongs to that, because so when I was growing up, I didn't have any friends, relations, any connection to the entertainment industry, and I was told no a lot. Of I was often told, you don't have any relatives, you're never going to make it. So it's through internships. So my point is, don't take no for an answer. And I didn't have the internet then, so it's just sort of stumbling forward with enthusiasm. But the reason I bring this up is, so I always dreamed of working in the music business, and I succeeded to get employed in the music business. And it's not till afterwards, till I found incredible success and my calling and tapping into my superpowers, working in the combination of music and television, did I really understand I wasn't meant to be in the traditional music business or that part of the business, because I'm neither an artist nor am I a marketer slash salesperson. And people who are great at sales have all my respect. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a manager. So all those things, it's like there really wasn't a place for me there. But when I landed in TV, which was about storytelling and taking all the different talents that I have and had a value around that, was like suddenly I could flourish. So one is to, do the inventory and do the self-assessment and figure out like, well, what are my strengths and what are my skills? Two, if you realize there's something that you think I would love that or might be good at, I'm a big believer in lifelong training. Like I'm never not taking classes and learning and going better and getting deeper. So, just because I'm certified in coaching, I'm constantly upping my certifications and doing other kinds of trainings to become better at that. So one of the things is figure out what you're really great at, and then figure out where the opportunities are, where you might be able to create opportunity, and not be afraid to try stuff too. Because to your point, right, it's easy to be like, well, I don't. Okay, I don't have that skill. Okay, fair enough. So one, it's dip your toes. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Learn to reframe your questions, because maybe you don't even know what you don't know, so you're not necessarily asking to get yourself there. But so don't be afraid of trying stuff and not working out, so you can learn from that. But there are ways to figure out like, where can I fit in? And one of the things that popped into my head too is this idea of like, we live in the era, your podcast is a perfect example of this, of the super fan, where you don't have to, I meant like a lot of legitimacy, and the fact that people have taken being a super fan and translated that into big brands and business. And I bring that up because you could say, well, I'm not a journalist. That's true. But you know what? If you keep showing up consistently and providing quality content, you're creating a lane for yourself. And many people have started with podcasts and blogs and different things in the super fan category that have become springboards and becoming really, really credible. And a lot of those people I've watched along the way, behind the scenes, training, taking writing classes, getting mentorship from people, learning, studying the work that they're doing, and learning out how can I constantly make my content better. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredible. And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned the super fan era too, because I am such a believer in it. And that's even how I started my TikTok account, is because I love the band BTS. And so I would be making all these BTS videos, and you would see tens of thousands of people start to like these videos and view these videos. And you would think, wow, this is really incredible. The fact that all of these people can come together and be united and share. It's really a parasocial relationship with these bands. And from there, I'm like, you know what? That makes you realize, okay, I can tell these stories. Okay, I am able to pose thoughtful questions to a community and be able to spark ideas and advance conversations. And so I think that actually was really kind of a springboard for me to even I don't know if I would have this podcast if it wasn't for just making TikTok videos about BTS. And it's like, I knew that I didn't want my brand to be around one music act or singer or anything, but just knowing that I believe in the power of community so much, and just in music in general, music to bring people together, to foster a sense of belonging, to just kind of like transport them to a particular place and time with certain people in their lives. That's always what I'm trying to channel. And I think that, connecting back to what you said, finding out what you are good at, I think when you're doing it, you kind of get that feeling too. You're like, wait, it's not because of a number of likes or comments or whatever. It's because you put something out into the world that, and it sounds a little bit silly if I say like you made a TikTok video you're proud of, but like it's 2022, so we can go ahead and say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Ixnay on people who cast aspersions on that. Of course, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I really want to start with, I loved your beautiful statement of purpose. I believe in the power of community. That's incredible. And that informs everything that you do. And I just think that's incredible. So that's another point for your listeners, is to really the power of understanding your purpose and what, makes you glow. That's incredible. But the other thing too is, hey, Nicole, you're doing it. You're creating content. So wow. I just had to stop and marinate on that for a second. The idea that you feel for any second that you should question, making a video on TikTok. That's amazing. You're reaching people. And I think it's really powerful to make someone's day. Life is hard. Even without a pandemic, life is hard 3 years ago for many of us. So if you make someone smile, or that shared connection, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I think that a little bit of my career transition imposter syndrome was just showing, because I know that that's like a buzzword right now, but I really didn't feel it until I left corporate, and that timing really aligned. I left my corporate fashion job in New York City 1 week, all of 7 days before lockdown. And so it was really interesting timing, but finally feeling like, oh wow, when you get imposter syndrome, it's because you're actually taking action and you're bridging a knowledge gap. Because when you're complacent and kind of staying in the same place, and you're not consciously always looking to grow and learn and expand and put yourself in rooms with people who not only help you do that, but you facilitate their growth and expansion in some kind of way, with a mutual benefit. That's the hard thing. It's easy to sit and complain at your job, or to stay in the same place, or to say, well, I mean, it's not bad. I guess this kind of is just the way it is. And look at the life that you really want as aspirational, when I felt like this a lot. This connects to the shoulds, because on paper, oh, I work at these impressive fashion companies. Look at my resume. Look at my zip code in Soho in New York City. And it really wasn't until the pandemic to be like, wait, it's time to totally rethink what was societal conditioning versus what do I really want in life, and going a few levels deeper. Okay, I want this. Why? Okay, next level deeper. Why? And keep asking yourself until you really get to like the core root of things. And I think that's tricky too, figuring out what you actually want for yourself.
That was beautiful, by the way.
Thanks.
Good for you. And part of that one is that staying in your comfort zone is a false construct of safety, which I think you understand in the work that you do. It feels superficially safe. I mean, but being stuck isn't actually safe. And that's when I get into like why you shouldn't focus strictly on fitting in, but how do I stand out a little bit? And like, it doesn't mean you have to go crazy and be like way out there, but it meant that if you're just in the mushy middle. And so to your point is life is short. And so if the safety zone at the end of it, that's actually not a safe place, because you're going to wake up one day with less time, or less opportunity to change, right? So it's like constantly, and I don't think it's an either or proposition. You don't, it's like I'm either safe or I'm scared out of my wits. No, we can find different gradations. And to your point too about imposter syndrome, is sometimes it's like our bodies and our subconscious talks to us. So it's like, what's the message that I'm getting? What should I be paying attention to? What's the lesson here? What's a question I'm going to ask? How do I want to feel if I don't want to feel this way? I mean, there are a bajillion questions that we can ask, but it's really important to stop and listen going, oh, okay. Like a little anxiety is good. It's talking to you. So that's, really, really important. And then at the end of the day, your point is like, but what do I really want?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always say how the universe kind of presents you with the same challenge over and over.
Oh, I couldn't agree. We're so simpatico.
Right?
I'm a huge believer in signs.
Mm-hmm.
They're everywhere. If you're open to seeing them, you're just, literally everywhere. And I'm a little obtuse. So sometimes I am not kidding. I will look up and see what I need to read, like on a billboard. I'm like, that was funny, universe. I got you though.
Yeah, it's so funny. And I will pick my favorite sign that I like to see. That's just a sign like everything's good in this present moment. Everything is okay. Kind of the way that they say, oh, if you get deja vu, it means like, oh, you're in the right place at the right time, whatever. Okay, this is my version of that. My first car when I was 16 was a red Ford Focus, like a 2002 Ford Focus. And they don't make that kind of car anymore, but I see them now. I see them on the road. I see them. Well, yeah, I guess that's mostly where you would see a car, but right. I see them fairly often. And I'm like, no, I don't want to look for the 2016 Ford Focus. Okay, maybe I saw a tan one or a blue one, but like the actual older version of the red car, whenever I see that, I'm just like, I'm doing good.
Oh, I love it. So what was your first concert?
Oh, okay. I think so when you're a kid and you go to concerts and your parents bring you, but it's kind of more like a kids show. I know I went to a few randomly, but my first like concert as a true fan, I guess, was NSYNC I think in 2001, because I actually went to a vintage show recently and got a shirt, which now it's vintage, even though it's from like 1999. Yeah, I got that shirt because I'm like, wait, was that the concert I went to? And I was talking to my mom about it because she brought me and my sister. And she's like, I wouldn't have brought your 6-year-old sister to the NSYNC concert. So I'm like, okay, maybe she was a little young. And then we came to realize it was, in fact, 2001, like right when pop came out. Wait, whatever. I might be mixing up the years a little bit, but NSYNC.
Oh, fabulous.
How about you?
Oh my God, I remember mine really well. By the way, back in my day, parents did not take their kids to concerts. It was like a different era. Anyway, my first concert was The Who at Anaheim Stadium. I was a massive, massive, massive fan. I was in 8th grade. This is like when the music business is on the cusp. So it's a sold out show. There are 55,000 of us in a baseball stadium. I could not believe that Roger Daltrey and I were in the same place at the same time. So it was like giddy, giddy, giddy. I went with my older brother and my dear friend Nancy. But like they ran out of water in the stadium. The bathroom stopped working. So it's like the concert business hadn't really caught up. It's such a different era now. And wildly diverse opening acts. I mean, I still have my ticket stub. I still remember Rufus and Shaka Khan, which was amazing. Little Feat, amazing, and the Billy Gibbons band, who nobody else remembers. But it's like it just like shows like that wouldn't exist anymore. But it was amazing, and I've seen the Who a bunch of times since. It was great. And then my second concert was Bruce Springsteen. I was in the 3rd row.
Wow.
Santa Monica Civic. He was just on the cusp, so that was a big show because he never played a venue that small again. I mean, except for like surprise shows now, but it was great. And Bob Marley. So those were my 3 big shows in 8th grade. Really good.
Wow. That is so exciting.
Oh my God, I loved it.
Yeah, my dad and I talk a lot about the kind of transition of the music business. He actually co-wrote a book on Led Zeppelin's concert.
Wow.
Yeah, their whole career. commemorized, and it's like I can't call it a coffee table book because there's way too much like valuable information in it for it to just be a book that sits on your coffee table without you opening it up a million times and referencing it. And yeah, there are pictures of ticket stubs and venues, and it's absolutely incredible. And to be like, wait, you went like the Led Zeppelin t-shirt that everybody wears around now, like you and mom had the real ones, and you went to a concert for $8.50. It's really interesting to see how there was that shift in the music industry from not having bathrooms working to it becoming, I guess commercialized might be a good word to sum it all up, where it's like now there's merch, now there's, or in a way that didn't quite
Well, I just think it became
exist
much more
before.
professional. It was like it became less renegade. And it's funny because I worked in the concert business, but I want to say for your listeners who are probably younger, I cannot underscore how massive Led Zeppelin was in the world. Because now we live in much more of a hyper niche world, but then it was much more of a mono thing. And Led Zeppelin were massive. Can't even tell you, all over the world, and especially huge in Europe. The way Queen was huge in Europe and a little bigger in Europe than they were here, but still massive.
Yeah,
So that's really exciting.
definitely. And I talk a little bit about nowstalgia too, because we're seeing it with Gen Z, where it's like they're obsessed with everything from the 90s, but they were born in 2004. And I think about it because I have major nostalgia for the 70s. And so Queen was my favorite band growing up.
Really?
And it's like, but I was never old enough to go see, well, I wasn't even born. So like I wouldn't have gone to see Queen in concert, and to be able to have parents who were obsessed with music too and be like, wow, what was that experience like? And I wrote a piece on Medium not too long ago, earlier this year, about the difference between nostalgia and nowstalgia being, whether or not you had that firsthand experience of it. And it first occurred to me when I went to Target and I saw a teenager with his mom behind me in the checkout line. He was wearing a My Chemical Romance t-shirt. And I'm like, that kid was not even born. And then I'm wearing a Fleetwood Mac Rumors t-shirt. And I'm like, oh my God, no. Like, this is what I've always done my life too. But it was about the 70s and about classic rock groups. And so I understand that kind of experience that you can have where you were not there. You might not have even been born, but the way that music just has that impact. And sometimes when you are trying to figure out, okay, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? What do I value? Even fashion's a huge way that I express myself. And because expression is my core value, that's ultimately why I got into that industry in the first place, is because you get to choose. You get to be whoever you want to be. And sometimes I think when people maybe don't have that inner guidance yet, or like that inner voice, or even confidence to be able to say, okay, this is how I want to dress or whatever, they can look to these people on stage or on the television screen, and it can be so inspiring for them.
I want to go back to something you said. So I really started to notice when my son was little, he's a hockey player, and believe me, there's a thread to this, was listening to the same music. Doesn't matter whether you're in a rink in Canada or a rink in the South or a rink in New York State, the same music plays all the time. And what I was riveted by was it's the Who and Led Zeppelin, anything Who's Next, variety of early Led Zeppelin, Drake, Eminem, Jay-Z, White Stripes, like, Seven Nation Army, maybe some My Chemical Romance. But the point is, these kids are this music that is, some of it's 50 years old or more now, that just came out, resonating. And I thought about, okay, when I was a kid, music that was 50 years old was not, nobody my age was listening to music that was 50 years old, except for me sometimes, because it would have been in a very, very, very old movie. And I loved movies, and I still do. But so my point is, there's something powerful that you're tapping into about when you think about if the boy at Target if he actually knows who My Chemical Romance is and why it speaks to him. Because there's something about Gerard that's also pretty amazing, between that, the music, and Umbrella Academy, his need to create and how he creates is fascinating. So it's like, what I was getting at is the fact that and I'd love to hear, like, what is it about, Fleetwood Mac that resonates with you? Because I still listen to it, and I was there for the first time. Do you know what I mean? That it's still, there's some power in that. When I think about, like, my son, 6 years old, on the ice and listening to, Behind Blue Eyes or anything from Who's Next, and listening to Drake and Eminem, I'm like, it's all speaking to him. And I actually thought a lot had to do with the beat. Oh, and AC/DC, by the way, who I never got in real time, but now I get it. There's something about it. It's visceral. A lot has to do with the beats. It's literally mirroring how our heart beats. But what is it about Fleetwood Mac that speaks to you?
Yeah, I think that even just seeing women in the space was really important to me. And when you look at classic rock, I mean, I can't make up a percentage, but most of them are men. And I think yeah, maybe 99.9, but, like, you know what I mean? And so seeing women in this group, and they could still be a part of a rock band. And listen, I love pop music more than anything. And I definitely see myself in kind of like the Cher and the Britney and the big pop stars, but I love rock music too. And even just seeing, it sounds so corny, I feel like, to say like girls can rock, but like basically, yeah. And I love seeing just kind of this is definitely a nostalgic take on the 70s, because I mentioned this trend groovival a lot, where it's like the love for the 70s from the vantage point of the 90s. And just due to the socio-political atmosphere of the 90s, groovival lacks some of the really meaningful context of what actually living on Earth in the 1970s was like. So it's very easy to romanticize
This is deep, Nicole. This is amazing. Keep going.
This
I'm
podcast tagline is deep conversations about superficial things. Like, this is what I think about. Yeah, but it's like, it's so easy to romanticize this era, and you think, wow, my parents were teenagers and it was right before they met, and it's really, it's about storytelling, and it's about thinking like, wow, there was this world. And even just the disco era, all of that fascinates me so much, because you see this distinct kind of change in the clothing and the attitudes, and even how it so interestingly segues from, because I very much love the kind of like flower power mod vibes of the 60s, how that transitioned into the 70s, and then from the 70s going full on glam and hairspray for the 80s to open up it's a beautiful segue into my era, the 90s. And I don't know, I just think about that kind of like continuity of time, and being able to really see how these bands from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s really kind of like paved the way and opened up opportunities. And even if that opportunity, I think, especially because I'm a millennial, but Gen X just has such a strong ethos of like doing things differently, not being a sellout, and seeing that era come through too. Even if the bands that had come before them solely gave that opportunity just for Gen X to not subscribe to the mainstream, that was a moment. And then when my generation comes along, it's like we're the biggest sellouts of all time. And how you see that go hand in hand with not just culture, but with technology too, and with the evolution of social media. And I think now, all the way down the line in 2022, Avril Lavigne's album that she released earlier this year is probably my favorite album of the year so far. I still have to listen to My Chemical Romance, just came out with a new album. And something I wanted to mention too, thinking about hockey practice, when I was doing cheerleading, this was in the mid 2000s, I was doing cheerleading, and I did it for 3 years, and 2 years I had 2 different coaches. One of the coaches, we only did routines with contemporary music, so it's all early 2000s pop and R&B songs. So Usher and Christina Milian probably, and just some really awesome artists that we were all currently listening to. And my other cheerleading coach was obsessed with all of the 80s bands. So we were always doing routines to Bon Jovi and Journey and AC/DC too. There's just this certain niche of rock music that was always featured in cheerleading competition routines. I don't know. I think it's just because of, right, like that pounding, that adrenaline, and it's like you got to feel that before you go and like do 5 back handsprings.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say I had a little bit of a different 80s because I was in college radio and I loved British music. And so Britpop, which is popular now, it's amazing, but was not the mainstream 80s that you think of now. So it's like, I mean, I loved the Jam and the Clash. I still listen to The Cure constantly. Big New Order fan. Anyway, just lots and lots of like Britpop and synthesizers and Human League and Duran Duran. I have a soft spot for, and early U2 and all the bands. So it's funny because it's like certain 80s, other people's 80s is different than my 80s, which was actually an outgrowth of punk rock, right? And very like, and the funny things that my kids still love to do is like they go thrifting. I'm like, that's what I did, right? And so I just love seeing how the keeps going. And the other fun thing I was going to say is the connection of Nicstalgia, or nostalgia, nowstalgia, is I fell in love with Harry Styles. It's got to be like 5 years ago now, whenever it was, when because I was vaguely aware of One Direction, but it's when, I don't know how it popped up in my feed, but when he did a surprise thing at the Troubadour announcing his first album, and he did a duet with Stevie Nicks, and they sang Landslide, and the love and respect he showed to Stevie Nicks. And I was like, I don't know who this kid is, but I love him. And I've been like a diehard Harry fan ever since, because Stevie was a client in my first job.
Wow.
So I did some work with her. So, yeah, but I actually, and amazing stories there. And I love her, but I really actually wanted to ask you again, what is your definition of selling out? Because that was actually an interesting thing. Like if you step back, but like everything is overly commercialized now, I would personally say, but there was an anti sales thing that definitely comes out of DIY and punk rock. And the Gen X thing that also is an inhibitor. Certainly when you have your own business, if you've come up through that, that's a big block that I work with people to work through. So I'm really curious, like is it possible to sell out? What does it mean to sell out? What, on the scale, because it's pretty gray, where do we go from being validly commercial to, we have no heart and soul left? Because I mean, I think that's what gets into this nebulous region of like, is there any soul there?
Yeah, I think that it depends on what your values are, and then are you living consistently to those values? Because I read at the beginning of the year, I think Dan Ozzie wrote a book called Sellout, and so he chronicles the journeys of, most popularly, Green Day, Jimmy Eat World, even the Donnas. I loved seeing the Donnas in there, because in the early 2000s, I was like, wow, there's this girl group, but they're not pop like everyone else. Like they rock and they play instruments and they're so cool. And so, yeah, them having to make these choices. Okay, are we going to kind of forget where we came from? I think that's where like the common connotation of selling out comes from. It's that you have to betray, like your values become so polar opposite to kind of like the motivations that you had when you were starting out. And granted, listen, I think that if you don't look back on yourself from a few years ago and you're like, it might be a little bit cringy, it's like you're not growing. Like you want to be able to advance, and change can be a good thing, but it's like,
wait, I love this. Let's celebrate the cringe. No one has ever said that. I love that.
Celebrate
you're cringing,
the cringe.
If you're cringing, you're doing something right. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Because I would look back at things that I did and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I should just, I don't know how I feel about this, but it's like everything that you create is a reflection of how you feel about yourself in that moment. And you want to keep progressing toward whatever your goal is and to hopefully gain more confidence and insight along the way. And so does that mean that, like, is expression ever going to not be my core value? No. Is
Wait, and also to
enthusiasm?
interrupt you, to go back to your point though, there's no growth if you don't take a risk. So that, again, being safe isn't safe.
Mm-hmm.
That being safe actually means being stuck, if we're using
Right.
your definition. So good for you. Go on
Yeah.
and go on and go on and cringe on. I love that. So I'm sorry, keep going, expressing yourself.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's not like expression and enthusiasm and connection and curiosity. Those are really the four pillars. And it's like, it's not like those are not going to be important to me. You know, I think that, yeah, like you said, if it involves taking risk, and in addition to having a false sense of stability, I think security is a really important word there too. Because people think, okay, if I have this job, it's secure. And it's like, well, secure in what? Just because you have a consistent paycheck coming, what if that paycheck amount is not your worth or you're not happy with it? Then what's secure about that? It's just consistent. It's just a pattern that you're used to. But what takes even more courage, if you know that that paycheck is not aligned with, me and my friends say highest and best, trademarked highest and best, like whatever happens, it's for the highest and best purpose of who you are, who you can become. And that's like the scary path to take, but it's so worth it.
Oh yeah, bet on yourself. And then again, to your point, false sense of security, actually, because we see it over and over again. It just takes one merger, um, one weird thing to happen in the stock tanks. Anyway, that suddenly that job that you thought was secure isn't secure. Companies that seemed really steadfast or sudden, may have sudden massive layoffs. So that's a false narrative as well. That, again, I come from a different generation where I'm the last people who, when I was coming out of college, you still believe that you would have that one job for your entire career. It obviously vanished, early in my days. So your point's really well taken. That I'm, bet on yourself, and then depending on where that goes, and then you're also the sense of like where are your values. But the other thing, and I read about this all the time, is again going back to your sense of growth. Artists have to grow, and so sometimes the thing that we fall in love with in an artist, awesome, but it's like they're growing in a different direction. And so maybe with an open heartedness, just go, okay, they're going creatively in a different direction. I'm not going to hold it against them. I'm not going to get mad. It's like, that's awesome. They're going that way and I'm going this way. And that's all okay. But you know what I mean? Because we have the sense that I get the same way too, going, oh yeah, I don't really like their later work. I can be a little about it. And then I realized, well, what's the point in that? It's just like, I keep, I love what I love and that's okay. But and I distinctly remember this. I had a fanzine way back in the day and interviewing the Go-Go's before they even had a studio album. Oh my God. Loved them so much. And seeing that, going to see them at the Whiskey every week with X and all the early 80s LA bands. But the sense, like, they even talked about it. It's like, every artist wants their music to be heard. And we were sitting there like, well, we don't want you to sell out and become corporate and like start playing stadiums. God forbid. Like, we wanted them to keep playing the Whiskey a Go-Go to a few hundred people a night for the rest of their lives. Okay, not fair, not realistic, right? But like, that would have been great for us if they were still doing that, right? We didn't want to share them. There's an also thing is, I don't know if you're, if you're an early adopter, you don't want to share your band with anyone or that artist or that filmmaker or that writer or whatever. And so that's on us as a, and so that again comes part of like my generation coming up from, a punk rock ethos that then shows up in the early sort of, like 90s grunge and Gen X ethos, but it's like, that's not fair. And so then we put a false, again, unfair notion into what it is to sell out. Everybody has the right. It's like, that's awesome. To your point, if you're still in line with your values and you're doing quality work and you care about the impact that you're making and, bringing joy to the world, why shouldn't you be making $1 million, bajillion, gajillion dollars? Why not?
Yeah. I love being an early adopter, but I do think that there is a barrier between early adopters and the early mainstream in that people love gatekeeping. And I think that's a little bit heartbreaking to see, because you should want to grow. If they're your favorite artist, I mean, it's like your friend, your family, you want to see them grow and progress and get better and be better and do what they love doing. But are you, because you don't want to grow and change and learn with them, are you ultimately holding them back
So well
from
said.
that?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting perspective to take. And I think that anytime you've seen an artist I mean, because it happens all the time when they'll come out with a new album, it will be something slightly different. And I think that now, because we're used to kind of everything being sold to us, it's very easy for fans to be like, oh, well, their management just made them do that. That's not authentic to them. That's not the real them. And it's like, well, you don't actually know the real them. This part of the business is to be able to sell things to fans. And so it's like, I think understanding with fans too, and I think BTS is the closest I've seen with this, and maybe Taylor Swift too, where it's like their fans genuinely want the best for them, and almost like too much, almost to a gatekeeping extent, because it is a parasocial relationship. You don't know Taylor Swift personally, and so you have to kind of let her do what she wants to do, but at the same time respect when someone is growing, and that gives fans the choice of how they want to grow too.
Wow, that was so beautifully said. And you know what? When you started, I was thinking, oh, there can be certain parallels from the gatekeeper point of view in other glamour areas, like fashion, when a street brand or something gets hot, and suddenly it's like, well, that's not cool then if everybody's wearing it, I don't want to wear it. It can happen in restaurants, certainly in places like LA, New York, or anywhere where it's the idea of being hot. But as you went deeper, I realized, it is such a unique situation in music because of the emotional connection, and because music there's neuroscience around this, the way music is so tied, and even in your whole branding around Nicstalgia, but I mean, music is so completely tied to memory and how our ability to memorize and to trigger, even the sense of, as a memorization technique for everyone, from the work I do as a media coach. When you're trying to memorize something, if you put it into either rhythm or to song, you will memorize it much easier and faster than if you're just doing it as narrative or language. So I'm bringing that up because the best music speaks for us, and that's where we start to take this sense of ownership, and it's really powerful and it's really important. But to your point, we don't actually know, and we actually have to hold space then for these artists who speak for us. To your point, so beautifully said.
Thanks. I think Britney Spears is a really good contemporary example of this, because in the midst of the Free Britney movement, you'll see some fans where they will be like, wow, now she can record a new album or whatever. And I'm like, I don't want her to be totally honest. I have such strong memories with her songs growing up. And if she wants to lead a private life from now on, and if she wants to just get married and have her family and do what she wants to do, I am okay with that. And I think that being a fan, yeah, I really do, in the most optimistic way possible. You want the best for that person, even if that thing isn't the best for you. Like, would we want her to be making music forever? Yes, hypothetically. But realistically, it is really interesting to see how that parasocial relationship runs parallel to the rest of the relationships that you have in life, whether it's a friend or somebody who, there's ebbs and flows in all of these relationships. And sometimes people are in your life more closely sometimes than they are in others. And I think being able to give that celebrity or that stranger, that musician, grace in, okay, maybe it's time. It's a different season now. I think it's definitely, people don't look at it this deep, but like, I think about it.
Okay, that's love. That's also incredibly mature, because to your point, I don't know that making music right now is the healthiest thing for Britney Spears. And also to your point, it was incredible, the momentum, and to watch the Free Britney movement, but she doesn't owe us anything, right? She doesn't owe us. And but what you just said about holding space and grace, that's incredible. So like you're a true loving fan. I mean, that's beautiful.
Thank you. And I think that I finally have no shame around being a fangirl. I think that when I was
Oh,
growing
amen.
up, right? I think when I was growing up, it was like, okay, you're allowed to show up, but not be too much. You're allowed to be enthusiastic, but don't go overboard. You're allowed to speak your mind, but don't do it too much so that other people are kind of questioning you. It's like, no, if you have good intentions and you have genuine enthusiasm, maybe I think Taylor Swift actually might have said something about that recently, where it's like, if you have enthusiasm for something, like go ahead and express that. There's no shame in that, because I think that that is kind of like that early adopter air of, I don't know, it's a little bit of pretentiousness where it's like, oh, well, like I'm cool, but like I'm calm and collected also. Let's not go crazy. Where one time I was in a restaurant in New York City and I was about to be seated and someone was like, don't freak out, but Justin Timberlake is right behind you. And I'm like, this is going to take everything I have to not completely bug and just pretend that I'm a normal downtown cool girl. Yes, I'm eating dinner 5 minutes away from my own apartment. It's not like I followed him to the restaurant, but like knowing that Justin Timberlake and Jessica Biel are sitting next to me for an hour and a half eating dinner, I was like, wow, this is taking all the respect, but it was out of a place of respect. It wasn't like, let me not be a fangirl because I'm trying to suppress it, but it's like out of respect of, wow, this guy's music was like so influential in my coming of age. Maybe I should be the one person in this restaurant that allows him and his family to eat in peace.
Mm. Well, amen to all of that, because I'm with you. I'm an unapologetic fangirl, and it is so true. It's like celebrating my inner dork every day, you know, embracing the uncoolness every which way.
It's fun. And I think you find your people who are the same way. And even a few of my friends from high school that I'm still friends with today, we first bonded when we were young because we like Queen and we like the Beatles and we listened to
Mm.
Led Zeppelin. And a friend's parents had this big vinyl collection. So we would listen to vinyl in her living room and things like that, where maybe like kids in the 2000s were not listening to vinyl records, but we were. And maybe that wasn't a cool thing. Now they sell them at Urban Outfitters. It's a cool thing. But before it was even a cool thing, I think being a little bit, they call it trend agnostic. Like as much as I love trends, I love fashion, I love the cutting edge of things, I also love my stuff too. And I think really realizing when you're a creature of habit and being like, even when this thing isn't the most absolutely in vogue thing there is, it's still something that brought me together with other people. It's something that we bond over and something that still can bring us joy now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And again, goes back to the super fan. One of the greatest super fans of all time, Andy Cohen, built an empire from being a super fan. And I admire that every day.
I saw him walking down the street in New York once too. I'm like eating an acai bowl and I'm like, how about that?
Well, he's Mr. New York. You should see him on the street.
Yeah. I want to thank you so, so much for being here with me today. I could probably talk to you for 2 more hours.
Likewise. This has been so much fun.
Can you let everybody know where they can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. I am easy to find. So you can always find me via my website, abelintermedia.com. And it's Abel, A-B-E-L, intermedia.com. I have my podcast, Camera Ready and Abel. Also, you can find it on my website, but wherever you listen to podcasts. If you visit my website, you can download my free ebook, 12 Tips for Success on Camera and Off, which is highly relevant for anything, not even on camera, but for every Zoom call, job interview, etc. And then I'm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, somewhere else, Facebook, but at Barbara_B_Abel, ABEL. Love to connect.
Awesome. Thanks again, Barbara. And
Thank you.
we will see you next time, guys. Thank you.